Am I audible?
Yes, you can go.
Uh, Good evening, everyone. Welcome to today's session. Thank you, Dr. Shirsha, for your introduction. Today we are going to discuss about two aspects. One is basics of data analysis, and second, very important one, which most of us will have problem when we are doing our analysis. That is, which test has to be used when we are doing the statistical analysis. Okay? What we call it as choosing the appropriate statistical test when we are doing the statistical analysis. Okay, the first session is going to be a bit short because most of you are the seasoned researchers. You know these components. Just to touch on the basics, I'll be covering these basics of data analysis, but majority of the time we are going to spend on the second part of our presentation, that is which statistical test has to be chosen at which particular type of data. Okay, so this is something which is very encouraging, something which I always use when I'm doing my presentation. If I had only one day left to live, I would live it in my statistics class. Okay, so what could be the reason? People may think it is due to the passion, but most of us have got this opinion. The day would seem much longer because most of us have developed some kind of a fear towards the statistics. Okay, and some kind of a phobia, which we call it as, and we never consider this belongs to us. And most of the time the medical doctors, most of us will think that I took medical profession for the reason that I don't like mathematics, and this statistics is more or less mathematics only, more of mathematics only, then why should I really read about it? Okay, so that is the reason we develop a kind of a phobia towards statistics, but that is going to be the limiting factor for most of our research. If I say today's session, most of us think that statistics is a very hard nut to crack. We can't digest it, we can't crack it. And if I say with our webinar of today's session, I'm going to convert the whole statistics into a banana and I'll serve you and make it soft and more palatable, that is not going to be a matter. So you are not going to make it, we cannot make it very soft and make you eat. The hard nut, which cannot be made soft, together we will make it a bit crispy so that we can understand this statistics in a bit more, easier and meaningful manner. Whenever the statistics comes, people will ask you, what is statistics? Statistics basically deals with 5 components. Number 1, collection of data. We are going to collect the data for our study. After we collect, we are going to compile the data. Okay, the data will be compiled. So we are going to put the data in Excel sheet or the spreadsheet, SPSS, APinfo, any kind of a software where we are going to compile our data. And after we compile our data, we will analyze the data based on our objectives of the study. Okay, and after we analyze the data, we interpret the data. Okay, whether there is a statistical significance, whether there is no statistical significance, whether which group is having higher prevalence, which group is having lower prevalence, we are going to come out with the information out of the data. Okay, and after that we are going to present our data. Okay, so these are 5 essential steps when we are doing the data analysis. First, we collect the data, then we compile it, we analyze the data, and after analysis we are going to interpret the data, and after we interpret the data we are going to present it to the people how it looks like. Okay, so these are the 5 important pillars of the statistics. So most of the time we ask this question, what is data? Data is nothing but the fact we obtain from our study participants. The fact could be in terms of number or it could be in terms of information. If I ask you what is your age, you are going to tell me factually what is your age in terms of number. On the other hand, if I ask you what is the gender of your first child, you are going to tell me the gender. Gender cannot be measured in terms of number. It is an information. So data is nothing but the fact that we obtain from our research participants. There is a data is a plural. Some people have habit of telling, I collected datas. It is not a correct way of pronouncing it. Datas is not a word that is available anywhere. Data itself is a plural word. Datum is a singular term. So some people ask you, what is the difference between data and information? Data is a raw fact. Raj is 23-year-old male. Jay is 38-year male. Swati is 19 years female. This is the fact. This is the information that you get from the patients. But what is the information? Information is after I synthesize this data and make it meaningful. For example, out of 3 subjects included in my study, 2 are males and 1 is a female. So what I did, from my basic fact I have collected from the subjects, I derived some kind of an information out of it, a meaning out of it. This is the difference between data and information. Okay. So this is the most basic thing that I want every one of you to concentrate on. So the data has got different types. As all of you know, basically the data is divided into 2 types. One is something called qualitative data, which means what is your gender, what is the education status, what is occupation, what is the stage of the cancer. So if you look at all these data, here nothing is measurable directly. You cannot measure to what extent a person is a male or what extent a person is a female. These are not something which can be directly measured from the participants. Okay, so these are going to tell you the attributes or abstract form of information. So these are called as qualitative data. On the other hand, something which you can numerically measure or collect are called as quantitative data. Okay? For example, height, weight, BMI. You are going to measure the height of the patients, or you are going to measure the weight of the patients. You are going to calculate the BMI. These are all in terms of numbers, right? So these are called as quantitative data. Okay, understand there are 2 types of data: qualitative, which are going to tell you about the quality of a particular individual, and quantitative is, you are going to measure it in terms of a number. In qualitative data, we have 2 types. One is something called as nominal data and something called as ordinal data. What is nominal data? Nominal data is something which is again measured in terms of a quality. Name, for example, the gender of a person, present, absent, yes, no. These are all, if you look at this information, there is nothing called as a order, right? On the other hand, the ordinal data is, there is a kind of a arrangement. For example, stages. So you are going to arrange them in an order. There is an order in the arrangement of data. For example, if you ask a person about what is the severity of anxiety, mild, moderate, severe, very severe. If you ask what is the severity of anemia, mild, moderate, severe, very severe. So you are placing the data in an order. If you place the data in an order, you call it as a ordinal data. And when there is no order, just categories, male, female, yes, no, present, absent, married, unmarried. So what is this? This is category. You are categorizing the data. So you call nominal data also as a categorical data. Okay. So qualitative data is basically divided into 2 types. One is something called nominal data and ordinal data, based on whether when you are representing the data, whether there is a particular order or a stage or a pattern, you call it as a ordinal data. If there is no pattern, if there are only categories, you call it as a categorical nominal data. On the other hand, the quantitative data is again of 2 types. One is something called continuous data and other is something called as discrete data. What is the difference between continuous data and discrete data? In continuous data, a simple way to understand is, don't go too much into complicated statistics. The basic difference between continuous data and discrete data is, in continuous data, there will be the decimals. And in discrete data, there are no decimals. If someone asks you what is the height, what is your height, or what is your weight, people who are very, very specific about their weight, they are going to say, I am 85.3 kgs. I am 92.4 kgs. There is a decimal. For example, in BMI also 22.9 kg per meter square. There is something, there is always a decimal. There is always a chance to have a decimal. But in discrete data, there is no chance for having decimal. How many children do you have? If somebody asks you, how many children do you have? Can you say I have 4.5 children? No. So there is no scope for a decimal. There can be either 4 children or there can be either 5 children. So this is what we call as discrete data. Okay. To summarize, data is of two types. One is qualitative data and other is quantitative data. Qualitative data deals with quality of a particular subject. Okay. And quantitative data is a numerical fact. And in qualitative data, we have two types. Nominal data, which is more of a category where you are going to say what is the gender of a person, what is, a male or a female, whether it is present, absent, yes, no, something like that. And in ordinal data, it is something like the data is arranged in an order. Okay. And in quantitative data, the data that is numerical facts, which is of two types: continuous data, where there is a scope to have a decimal, and discrete data where there is no decimal, it is only the round numbers, round figures. Okay. So we call this is a basic classification of data. Okay. So I want all of you to remember this. If you know, by looking at the data, if you are able to find out whether it is qualitative or quantitative first, and after you identify whether it is a qualitative or quantitative, you need to tell whether it is a discrete or continuous. Next, if it is a qualitative, whether it is a nominal or ordinal. Okay. So these are the important things you need to remember when we are going to do the data analysis. I have very, very short exercise now. So I am enabling the chats. Okay. Yeah. We have few examples. Let's take these examples. First example, look at this and tell me whether the data is qualitative or quantitative. Put it in the chat box. Qualitative. Perfect. Most of you are answering it as qualitative. So it means you have understood it. After you say it is qualitative data, next question is whether it is nominal or ordinal. Very good. Most of you are mentioning nominal and few answers are ordinal there. So I'm a bit confused why you are taking it as ordinal. There is nothing called as a order of that color, right? Brown, black, blonde, then gray, others. So it is not the stage of a same hair. So they have say 200 individuals and they are classifying them, whether they are, how many are having brown color, black color, something like that. So this is a typical example for nominal data. Nominal data, and most importantly, it is a qualitative data. Let me take second example now. So whether it is qualitative or quantitative. Very good. Qualitative. Yes, this is a qualitative data. And second most important thing is whether it is ordinal or nominal. Excellent. So it is nominal data. Perfect. Shall we go to the next example? Yeah. Is it a qualitative data or quantitative? Yes. So now you are competent enough to differentiate the type of data, whether it is a qualitative data or a quantitative data, right? So in whether this is nominal or ordinal. Yes, most of you are answering it is ordinal because the data is arranged in a particular order. Yes. Next, shall we go to this example? Is it qualitative or quantitative data? How many members are there in your family? Yes. Very good. Yeah. So once it is how many members are there, once it is quantitative, whether it is nominal or ordinal. Sorry, it should not be nominal or ordinal. There is a mistake there. Whether it is discrete or continuous. Is it discrete or continuous? Yes, it is a discrete data. Thank you very much. Okay, it is discrete data. Okay, what about this? Is it qualitative or quantitative? Waist circumference. Quantitative, right? So, yeah. Is it continuous or discrete? It is continuous because when you are measuring the waist circumference, you are going to say whether there is a whether there could be percentage, there could be some decimals in between. Some people are asking in between what is it, whether there is something called interval and ratio, right? Some people are asking something about it. I just want to touch on it and go. I did not include it over here because, you know, when we are doing the rigorous statistical analysis, they may not be really required. Okay. So at least if you could able to differentiate these things, that is going to be okay. The difference between the interval and the ratio scale is, in the ratio scale, there is an absolute zero. And in interval scale, there is no absolute zero. Okay. The example for interval scale is our body temperature. So can you have an absolute zero in the body temperature? No. In case of ratio, there can be absolute zero. Okay, if you take 1 divided by other, you are going to get a 0 or 1 as a measure. Okay, in case of ratio scale, there can be absolute 0, 1 minus 1 equal to 0. But in case of interval scale, there is no chance of having a absolute 0. Okay, only the people who wanted it remember it. Otherwise, if you don't remember it, don't worry, it is not going to end the world. So at least if you remember these type of data, you are competent enough in doing the data analysis. Okay, we'll proceed further. So these are 3 important things that I again want to tell. I cannot proceed further unless I just brush up your minds on these components. Usually when you observe when most of you are working in academics, the teachers, so when when students come to the class, where do they want to sit? Basically, most commonly in my college, if you ask me, most of the students would want to come and sit at the center or back, and very few the students who come late, they want to come and sit in the front. And if you look at the bus, okay, when you enter into the bus, the government bus or wherever bus you want to get in, when people enter into the bus, unless it is reserved, most of the people want to sit at the center. This data which we have, which we obtain, also want to come and lie at the center of the observations. Most of the data want to fall into center around one particular set of observations. This tendency of data to fall into the center is called as measures of central tendency. To what extent the center of the data is attracting all different varieties of data is called as measures of central tendency. To what extent the data tends to fall around the center. So it is called as measures of central tendency. There are 3 types of measures of central tendency. One is something called mean, which all of us know from 7th standard onwards. And second is median, and third is mode. Okay. This is a simple example for mean. Mean is also known as average, right? So mean is, mean is a commonest type of variable, commonest type of measure of central tendency that we use. But there is a problem with this mean. Mean is always affected by the extreme values. For example, when you go into the community and you start doing the study, there will be one person who is one child who is 1 year of age, and in the same community there can be a woman who is 125 years of age. So this extreme affects the mean. Okay, that is a reason mean is a bit disadvantageous when your data has got extreme values. There is one student in your class who has taken 2 out of 100, and there is another student who has taken 99 out of 100. So there is a lot of variation in your data. So this variation affects mean. Okay, so this is a major disadvantage of mean. In that case, we use something called as median. Median is a centralmost observation. Okay, next to mean, this side and the opposite side, there are equal set of numbers. I think when you are studying the pharmacology, you might have studied what is the median survival rate, median survival time, or median death rate, okay, median period of existence, something like that. So that is a median, 50th observation, a centralmost observation. When mean is not useful, at that point in time, we use the median. So when are we going to use median then? When you have the extreme set of values. And the third one, which we do not use very frequently in statistical analysis, is mode. I think all of you know what is mode. Mode is the most frequently observed observation. There is another component called as measures of dispersion. Measures of dispersion is nothing but once all the data fall near the center, do you think all of them exactly will be on the same straight line? So this is how the normal distribution looks like. Okay, if you see here, this is our median. Okay, so most of our data wants to fall near this median, mean, right? So what is the amount of variation of each individual data from the mean or median is called as dispersion. Okay, in dispersion, the two commonly used dispersions are range, that is minimum and maximum, and second one is standard deviation. I want to spend 2 minutes on standard deviation so that you can understand what is standard deviation. Standard deviation is nothing but to what extent each of your data is related to the mean. For example, if you say the mean hemoglobin concentration of a particular study is 11.4 plus or minus 2. I'm repeating, in a particular study, the mean hemoglobin concentration is 11.4 plus or minus 2. That plus or minus 2, whatever you are putting is standard deviation. It means that your data is somewhere dispersed. Most of your data is somewhere dispersed between, if 11.4 is your mean, 11.4 plus 2. How much is going to be 11.4 plus 2? 13.4. 11.4, 2. That is 9.4. So between 9.4 and 13.4, almost 68% of your study subjects are going to gather. This is the interpretation of standard deviation. Usually we go for 2 standard deviation. It means that most of the data, 95% of your variables will be within 2 standard deviation. What is this 2 standard deviation? I'll give you the same example. The mean hemoglobin concentration is 11.4 with standard deviation of 2. Okay, so if you say between 9.4 and 13.4, if you have 100 subjects in your study, out of them, almost 68% of the study subjects will be somewhere between 9.4 and 13.4. That is mean plus 1 standard deviation. And what is mean plus 2 standard deviation? You multiply that 2 by 2. 2 is our standard deviation, right? 2 into 2 is how much? 4. Almost 95 out of 100 of our study subjects will be between 11.4 minus 4. How much is it going to be? 7.4. And 11.4 plus 4. That is 15.4. This is something which is very common, like a logic, right? So standard deviation, true standard deviation is somewhere between 7.4 and 15.4. So this is a commonest used observation. There can be some people who are having hemoglobin concentration very, very low. So for example, 3, 4. So they do not fall into any of the standard deviation. They fall somewhere over here. They are called as outliers. Okay? So this is what you need to understand. Standard deviation is to what extent our data is arranged across our mean or median or more. Okay? So if you understand this, then we will go for this observation. So what is the distribution of data? The distribution is the data can be normally distributed or data can be non-normally distributed. There is nothing called, some people say data is normally distributed, sir, and some people say data is abnormally distributed. There is nothing called as abnormal distribution of data. Data can be either normally distributed or data can be sometimes non-normally distributed. If you see this particular figure, so here most of our observations are around this particular mean. This 3.5 is the mean body weight of a baby. So most of our observations are around this mean. Okay? So this is called as normal distribution, and sometimes it could be skewed distribution. Sometimes it could be left skewed or it could be right skewed. So how do you say whether the data is normally distributed or not? I want everybody's 100% concentration on this, because this is the most important thing that determines which statistical test you want to use in future. The data is said to be normally distributed. The rule of thumb is your standard deviation should be less than half of mean. Please remember, you can write it down also if you have a scribbling pad along with you. The data is said to be normally distributed if your standard deviation is less than half of mean. If your standard deviation is more than half of your mean value, the data is non-normally distributed. We will take examples for these things so that you can understand it in future. But please, all of you, remember, if you have a paper next to you, please write it down. The data is said to be normally distributed if your mean, if your standard deviation is less than half of mean. And if your standard deviation is more than half of mean, so you call it as non-normally distributed data. Okay? So let me come to the last part of my first session, that is, how do you present the data? The presentation of data is most important. You may cook a beautiful food. Unless you present it in a nice manner, it doesn't attract people. It doesn't make, it cannot influence people. That is a reason, have a better idea of presenting your data. So basically, data is presented in two forms. One is tables or graphs. Most of the people do a lot of takes in presenting the table. This is a very simple table, right? I'm just showing you a very, very simple table. Okay, so each table should have whatever I'm showing. All these components should be there in each of the table. Okay, let us dissect out this table and see what all things should be there to say it is a good table. Number one, the table should be self-explanatory. When you're writing your papers, when I'm reviewing the papers, most of the time before reading the results, I will look into the tables, whether the tables are explaining what the study intends to explain. The table should be self-explanatory. Second, the table should have a table number. If I want to point out where is the problem in 10 tables, I can easily pick up table number 3 has got this problem. Next, the table should have a table title. And the title should be self-explanatory again, very important. People put complicated titles to the tables. It becomes so difficult to understand what the table is all about. Okay, the title should be self-explanatory. And there should be something called as stub. So we call it as categories or variables. And there should be captions. So, when we are reviewing the papers, people keep these things blank and give it to us. Okay, so when you do, you get irritated, you get confused, what is there in which block, I am not understanding it. Okay, there should be caption and there should be body. This whole thing constitutes body of the table. And finally, there should be the footnote. I suggest you to put the statistical test or analysis you did in the footnote rather than putting it in the title. Multiple logistic regression analysis of the data is a table. It is not correct. Why that multiple logistic regression has been done? To find out the relationship between what variables. That should be the title, not the type of analysis. That analysis you can put it in the, okay. So this is the anatomy of a table. So I request people can take the photograph of it, or we can circulate the slides at the end. Your table should look like this. And there are different graphs. The common one used is the bar diagram. Understand when you are going to use a bar diagram. In a bar diagram, so each bar represents the quantity or the proportion of one particular variable. Okay. So for example, if we want to know what is the source of information about rabies, 65.6% of individuals were aware of rabies through the schools. These are bar diagrams. And there's something called as multiple bar diagram. When you want to compare, for example, in this particular graph, we try to show what is the difference in the baseline and endline knowledge about rabies. At the baseline, almost 80% of people were of opinion that the rabies can be cured. And after we gave education, this knowledge came down to 39.7%. Rabies cannot be cured. Okay, so we can easily compare whether our intervention, educational intervention, was effective or not. If this was in the study group villages, and in case of control villages where we did not do any kind of an intervention, what is the change? You won't expect much change over here. But here you expect a massive change. When you want to compare between different groups, so at that point in time, the multiple bar diagrams are of use. And this is something called as a component bar diagram. Each bar is divided into components. Okay. For example, if you look at the BCG scar, it is your major outcome variable. Among the children who are having BCG scar, how many were males, how many were females? You can easily represent it using the component bar diagram. And this is something called histogram. Histogram is not very commonly used unless you are testing the normality of the data. Okay. So histogram, the difference between bar diagram and histogram is there is a gap between the bars in the bar diagram. But in case of histogram, there is no bar. If there are gaps between the bars in histogram, it is the quantitative, categorical variables, the qualitative data. But in case of histogram, we usually use a histogram for the quantitative data. Okay, when there is an overlap between the groups, at that point in time, we use a histogram when your data is continuous. The major advantage of your histogram is going to tell whether the data is normally distributed or not. I want one of you to concentrate on this part of this histogram. I was talking to you, right? Whether the data is normally distributed or not. If you look at this graph, you can easily plot a normal distribution curve over here, right? Look at this variable. The mean of this data is 40.21 and standard deviation is 11.16. What is your interpretation? I was telling you, right? How to interpret whether the data is normally distributed or not based on the mean and standard deviation. The mean is 40, standard deviation is 11. Is 11 less than half of mean? What is half of 40? 20. Okay, 11 is definitely less than 20. So as your standard deviation is less than half of the mean, you are seeing this beautiful pattern where the data is normally distributed. Okay, this is a use of histogram to check whether our data is normally distributed or not. We use the histogram. Okay, this is how it looks like. I'm just putting all the I am just putting the points together. I'm drawing a curve. This looks a beautiful standard normal distribution. This is standard normal distribution because standard deviation is less than half of the mean and my data is normally distributed. And this is the pie chart. Please remember the pie chart has to be for the percentages. It is not for the absolute numbers. People put pie chart for the absolute numbers. Okay, do not put pie chart for the absolute numbers. The pie chart is for the percentages. Okay, so pie chart is another very commonly used. And next is a line diagram. Line diagram is again used for the continuous data. It is going to give you a beautiful interpretation. So what is the level of copper among people residing in the tribal areas? It is in the red color. And people in the urban areas, this is the copper level. So you can easily make out that the copper levels in people residing in the urban areas is less compared to the people residing in the tribal areas. This is a study we undertook in some tribes in the Mysore district. So when we identify, when we try to find out what could be the reason why people in the tribes have got higher copper level, they used to drink water and they used to cook in the copper vessels. That is the reason their copper levels are high. So you can easily make out the difference in the difference between two groups when you do the line diagram. Okay, so this is all about the first part of my presentation. So here we discussed very important things. One, what is statistics? Statistics deals with 5 components. Number 1, collection of data, compilation of data, analysis of data, interpretation of data, and finally presentation of data. Okay, so data is nothing but a factual information, the fact you get from your studies. And in data, there are 2 types. One is qualitative data and other is quantitative data. Qualitative data deals with the qualities of an individual. Quantitative data deals with the numbers. In the qualitative data, there are 2 types. One is something called nominal data and other is ordinal data. The difference is in nominal data, there are categories. In the ordinal data, there is an order. In quantitative data, we have 2 types. One is something called discrete and other is continuous. The difference between discrete and continuous is in discrete, it is a whole number, and in continuous, there is a decimal associated with it. Okay, and there are 3 measures of central tendency: mean, mode, and median. And second is there are 2 important measures of dispersion. There are 3, but I am telling something which is very necessary, very much necessary to you. Okay, so there are 2. One is something called range, that is minimum and difference between minimum and maximum observations, and second is something called as standard deviation. Standard deviation is nothing but to what extent the data is dispersed across the centralmost observation or central observation. So we call it as a standard measures of dispersion. Okay, and we have different ways of representing the data. The first one is something called tables, and second are set judiciously when you are doing your study and when you are writing the paper. I think when we are talking about the papers, we can discuss about it. Most of the time when you are publishing your research paper, most of the graphs are not allowed. So you need to put most of the things in the table. Merge few data and put it as a table. So tables are more important. So graphs are going to give the visual interpretation of your data. So I'm going to stop at this point in time. I request, I'm just opening the chat. So if you have any doubts so far, you can ask, then we will proceed further for the test. Oh, somebody is so fascinated about my first slide. Okay, so I just want to show it to them. Yeah, this is all. Happy? Third measure of central tendency is mode. Okay, mode is the most frequent observation. Okay, so someone is asking about box and whisker plots. I think I'll explain it to you at the end. What is box and whisker? I'll definitely. In action research, the mode is used, when you have 10 students telling the same answer, it means, you know, most frequent answer. What is but I'll tell you one simple example. In one of the universities, they asked the question, what do you mean by a slaughterhouse? There was a question on slaughterhouse. What describe about this? As I belong to community health, there's a question on slaughterhouse. You know, most of the students has mentioned the slaughterhouse is something which is where the destitutes are kept, is the most frequent answer, but it is not. Okay, more, you know, most frequent answer or the most frequent observation you get in your study is called as a mode. Mode is not subjected for any statistical analysis in the quantitative study, but in qualitative study, if there is the same answer that is getting repeated multiple times, so it means that it is, you know, more important to us. For example, we conducted a workshop on medical humanities where majority of students in their feedback, they mentioned role play was the best way for getting the information. Then out of 100 students who were participating in the workshop, almost 90 of them said the role play was the best one. So it means the role play is a mode, right? We'll discuss about correlation later. Yeah, how to calculate standard deviation? Please don't, remember, for God's sake, don't use the formula for calculating the sample size. Our job is, for standard deviation, our jobs are made so easy by our statistical software. Using MS Excel, you can calculate the standard deviation. Very easy. And you have very sophisticated softwares which are going to help you. Okay, I'll explain about the standard deviation. You know, how much is the time? How much is the time right now? Okay, so I'll explain. Shall I explain about this a bit later at the end after our study, our statistical test paper? I'll tell you again about standard deviation. Yes, thank you so much. Someone has permitted me to move to the next slides. I'm disabling the chat and I'll proceed further. Yes. Next and very important part of today's webinar is choosing the right statistical test. First, let me ask the question. Please introspect yourselves. Why do we need to use statistical test? There are two important reasons. Number one, if you find some difference between the blood pressure measurements with drug A compared to drug B, if you observe drug A is improving blood pressure, reducing blood pressure more compared to drug B, there can be two possibilities. The difference you observe could be a true difference or it could be just because of chance. If you take two groups of your students, male students and female students, measure their weight. Males weigh more than females is your observation. This observation could be a true observation or it could be just because of chance. To check whether the differences or association or relation or correlation you observe between the groups, whether it is a true variation or it is because of chance. To look for that, we use something called as tests of significance. Okay, so tests of significance are basically to check whether the difference you're observing is a true difference or it is because of chance. And most fascinating part of any statistical test is p-value. So much of us are bothered about p-value, right? Sir, my p-value did not come statistically. P-value is more than 0.05. So I'm not very happy with my research, right? So most of us are so much fascinated about p-value. So from where the p-values come? The p-values originate from your test of significance. Okay. So these are the two reasons why we do the test of significance. Number one, to find out whether the difference you observe or the relationship you observe is a true relationship or it is because of chance. And the second reason is to obtain what is called as a p-value. What is this p-value? Yesterday, when I put this webinar information about my webinar in my WhatsApp status, there were few people who immediately reverted back. They asked, sir, something which I never understand. What is this p-value? We usually fix this p-value to be your p-value of 0.05, less than 0.05. It means that whatever difference you get is a true difference 95% of the times, and it could be just because of chance in 5 out of 100. So this is what we call as p-value. So you always keep this p less than 0.05 most of the times. Sometimes you can put 0.01 also. Okay, so what is its interpretation? So when I'm doing a research and I observe a difference, I allow 95% of the times the difference should be a true difference. I allow only 5% of the times the chance. The lesser the p-value, your strength of difference is going to increase. Let us take this example, 0.1. How do you write this 0.1? 10 divided by 100. Out of 100 observations, 10 differences could be because of chance and 90 could be the true difference. So what has happened here? You are allowing 10 differences by the chance. So your chance factor has increased. Shall we look at this? 0.01. I will write it as 1 divided by 100. What is this 1 divided by 100? Out of 100 observations, 99% of the times the difference is a true difference. Only 1% of the times it could be because of chance. And if you look at 0.001, so how do we write 1 divided by 1000? In your study, the difference is a true difference 99% of the times, and it could be by chance only 1 in 1000 times. So your differences are very, very strong. Your statistical significance is very strong. Usually we fix the p-value to be less than 0.05. We allow 1 in 20 of our differences could be because of chance. We allow 5% of the chance in our study. Okay, so I'm going to stop here for 1 minute for you to understand. If you have any questions on interpretation of p-value, please ask, then we'll proceed further. It depends. People usually prefer small p, but there is nothing wrong in putting capital. The most of the studies will take p-value less than 0.05 for the reason that we want to keep the chance to the extent of less than 5%. We'll give more examples in future when we look into you cannot take 0.1%, 0.1 as a p-value because you are allowing more chance. 10 out of 100 are because of chance. That becomes too much. So that is the reason we usually do not take more than 0.05. And some people will usually classify the p-value. The mild significant, moderate significant, severe significant. There is nothing like that. They're same. P-value and level of significance are almost same. There is nothing. I gave the answer p-value less than 0. That is a reasonably okay kind of a chance we can take for p-value to be less than 0.0. Reasonably okay kind of a difference you can take. It is again arbitrary. So there is no specific answer why it should be less than 0.0. P-value we usually set less than 0.05. If you want to do a study with very novel kind of a drug, the drug which has got high chances of adverse drug reaction, at that point in time you want the chance to be very low. For example, I am trying a new drug which has got very high chance of adverse drug reaction. At that point in time, you do not want to take any chance when you are going to do the study. At that point in time, the p-value should be less than 0.001, 1 in 1,000 chance I can take. Okay, so if you are doing a screening study, or when you are doing a kind of a prevalence kind of studies, at that point in time, you are not going to, you may take a bit larger p-value. So, but it should be less than 0.05. This is an arbitrary requirement. Okay, so I will go further. I'll explain about these p-values further again. You'll get many more times. There are two types of tests of significance. One is something called parametric tests of significance, and other are called as non-parametric tests of significance. Parametric tests of significance are the one which are used when the data follows normal distribution, and non-parametric tests are used when your data does not follow normal distribution. I'll again reiterate here. How do we say whether our data follows normal distribution or not? Our data follows normal distribution when our standard deviation is less than half of mean. When our standard deviation is less than half of mean, we are going to use a parametric test of significance. When our standard deviation is more than half of mean, we are going to use non-parametric tests of significance. Please remember, parametric tests of significance are for the normally distributed data, and non-parametric tests are for the non-normally distributed data. So these are few of the tests of significance. Some have already started asking when are we going to use a chi-square test and all. Okay? So we are going to discuss each one of them in a bit more detail. Okay? So these are set of parametric tests of significance. For example, pair t-test, unpaired t-test, Pearson's correlation, ANOVA. And non-parametric tests are sign test, Wilcoxon sign rank test, Mann-Whitney's test, Kruskal-Wallis test, Friedman test, and most commonly used one, chi-square test. Don't get too much carried away with the names. Okay, so we are, at least if you remember for what type of data, which type of test has to be used, you have already cleared your first part. No, you have already cleared your first part of your exam. So when you know that what type of data it is. Second part of exam is whether your data is following normal distribution or not. So you already know that if your standard deviation is less than half of the mean, you have cleared your second stage of your exam. Okay. And next part is which test to be chosen, that we will discuss a bit later. The first type of a test I am going to discuss today. When your data, please remember, concentrate with what I speak. I'll be very slow now. When your data is qualitative, it is measured in terms of proportions. Proportion is nothing but percentages. And when you want to find out whether there is any difference between these two percentages, the test we apply is Z-test. Z-test is to check whether there is a difference between two proportions. Please recall your previous session. We were discussing what is the difference in prevalence of anemia among women residing in rural and urban areas, right? So anemia prevalence, we measure it in terms of percentage, right? So whether there is the difference is a true difference or it is because of chance, we analyze it using the qualitative test, a test called as Z-test. Let us take this example. Here in this study, the data is qualitative. Please concentrate. Dengue is a preventable disease. The responses are yes or no. Yes or no is a qualitative data, right? It is measured in terms of percentages, 52.4 against 91.6%. In the pre-test, 52.4% of people said dengue is a preventable disease. And in post-test, 91.6% of people said dengue is a preventable disease. There is an improvement in the knowledge, right? 52.4% to 91.6%. We are comparing two percentages here. When you are comparing two percentages, okay, so you are going to apply a test called as Z-test. And this Z-test is going to tell us whether the difference you are observing here, 52.4 against 91.6, whether this difference is a true difference or it is because of chance. When we apply z-test here, we get the p-value of less than 0.01001. What does it mean? 1 divided by 1000. It is telling me, the p-value is telling me that whatever difference you are observing, this difference is true difference 999 out of 1000 times. And this difference could be because of chance 1 in every 1000. So we call it as a z-test. I repeat, z-test is used when your data is qualitative. It is measured in terms of percentages. And when you want to find out the difference between two percentages, whether that difference is a true difference or it's because of chance, we use something called as z-test or z-test. Now let us come to the next type of statistical analysis, which most of us are fascinated to use, is called as categorical data. Yes, no, mild, moderate, severe, present, absent. Okay, when your data is categorical, you have exclusive categories: mild, moderate, severe, married, unmarried, present, absent, yes, no. So these are called as categorical qualitative data, so nominal data. In this type of test, in this type of data, we are going to use a test called as chi-square test. CHI square. We call it as a chi-square test. So don't pronounce it as chi-square test and don't pronounce it as chi-square test. It is chi-square test. Take this example. You have category of ages and you have category of BMI. Age is also divided into categories. BMI is also divided into categories. To find out whether there is any association between age and BMI categories, we use a test called as chi-square test. And the chi-square test is going to tell us whether there is association between gender and BMI categories, age and BMI categories, and locality and BMI categories. It is going to tell us the relationship between two categorical variables. So you are going to use a chi-square test. So here, if you look at age is divided into category. Age, even though is a continuous data, discrete data, right? But we have divided age into categories. Okay? It becomes a categorical data. When you use this categorical data, you want to find out whether there's any association between age and BMI at that point in time between two categorical variables, whether there's any association or a relation, we use a chi-square test. So our p-value here is less than 0.05. It is clearly indicating that there is a statistically significant association between age and BMI. Let us take another example. We have two categories. The categories here, we want to find out whether there is any association between hypertension, the stages of hypertension or the grades of hypertension with the gender. The hypertension is divided into categories. Agreed? We have three categories of hypertension: normal, pre-hypertensive and hypertensive. And we have two categories of gender, male and female. We want to find out whether there is any association between the gender and the hypertension at this point in time when you have two categorical variables. When you are trying to find out the relationship between two set of categorical variables, the test we are going to use is a chi-square test. So what is the interpretation over here? The interpretation is there is a statistically significant association between gender and hypertension. Okay. So this is what we call as a chi-square test. Chi-square test is used. So far we discussed two tests for the qualitative data. For the qualitative data, we have discussed two tests. The first one is z-test. If your qualitative data is measured in terms of percentages, use a z-test. And if your qualitative data is in terms of categories, you want to find out whether there is any relationship between two categories, you are going to use what is called as a chi-square test. Chi-square test is the most commonly used statistical test. Next, let us come to the quantitative data. In the quantitative data, we have two different types of data. It could be an unpaired observation or it could be a paired observation. Please remember, qualitative data is measured in terms of percentages or absolute numbers. Quantitative data is always measured in terms of mean and standard deviation or median or mode, whatever. There could be two different situations. We are discussing about the parametric test of significance, right? So now the first type of test which I'm going to introduce to you for the quantitative data is unpaired t-test. Unpaired t-test has to be used when, number one, your data is quantitative. Please remember, your data is quantitative. Second, the data is measured in terms of mean and standard deviation. Next, your data is normally distributed. And most importantly, there are two independent groups which are exclusive of each other. And finally, it is going to give you the difference between two means. Let us take example. So it will make you understand. I'm going to open the chat box now so that, we can just be a bit interactive when we are discussing, so that it will be easy for you to understand things. Remember the assumptions for unpaired t-test. Number one, the data should be quantitative. Second, the data should be measured in terms of mean and standard deviation. The data should be normally distributed, and there should be two independent groups which are exclusive of each other. And this test is going to tell us whether there is a difference between two means. Let us take this example. Uric acid levels, MDA, SOD, vitamin E, vitamin C, all these are qualitative data or quantitative data. Please keep putting your responses. Quantitative, right? Please keep putting your responses. The data is quantitative, right? Second question I'm going to ask you. Second question is whether these groups, we have two groups here. How many groups are there? There are two groups. One is case and control. Are these groups exclusive, independent of each other? Are these groups independent of each other? Yeah. Can a person be both case and a control? No. They are independent groups, right? Next. Whether the data is following normal distribution. How do you say whether the data is following normal distribution? Look at mean and standard deviation. The standard deviation should be less than half of mean. Is it less than half of mean there? So standard deviation is less than half of the mean. So your data is normally distributed, right? And when your data is quantitative, measured in terms of mean and standard deviation, next is your groups are independent of each other and there are only two groups and your data is normally distributed. At that point in time, the test you are going to use is independent sample t-test or unpaired t-test. Whatever difference you are observing here is the true difference. If you look at the p-value, it is 0.001. That is 1 divided by 1000. Whatever difference in the uric acid levels you are observing between cases and controls is a true observation, almost 999 out of 1000 times, or it could be because of chance 1 in every 1000 times. Let us take next example. Okay. So is this okay with the p-value? Is this okay with the unpaired t-test? So you have two different groups and the groups are independent of each other and your data is quantitative and it is normally distributed. Let us go to the next example. Another very simple test that we use, something called as a paired t-test. Paired t-test is used when your data is quantitative. It is measured in terms of mean and standard deviation and your data is normally distributed and variables are dependent on each other. The post-test depends on the pre-test. Okay, and it will give idea about difference between two means again. Let us take this example. If you look at this example, tell me whether the data is qualitative or quantitative. Qualitative or quantitative? Quantitative, right? Yes. Is it measured in terms of mean and standard deviation? Yes. Okay. Whether the data is normally distributed? Look at the standard deviation and mean. The standard deviation is less than half of mean. Okay. Are the groups independent? There is a pre and a post test. They are dependent on each other, right? The post test value depends on pre-test value. So at that point in time, the test you are going to use is a paired t-test when there are only two observations, before and after. Is that fine? So at that point in time, we use something called as a paired test. Let's go to the next test. I was discussing with you something called as when there are two groups, the two groups are independent of each other. At that point in time, we use unpaired t-test. What will be the situation when there are more than two groups? There could be 3 groups, there could be 4 groups, there could be 5 groups. And you are measuring the data in terms of mean and standard deviation. When you have more than 2 groups, when the groups are independent of each other, at that point in time, we use something called as ANOVA. ANOVA is nothing but analysis of variance. Okay, don't pronounce it as INOVA. It is not INOVA, it is ANOVA. ANOVA is the difference when your groups are independent of each other, when you have more than 2 groups, when your data is normally distributed, and when your data is quantitative. At that point in time, we use something called as ANOVA. I'm also pronouncing ANOVA. Okay, so look at this. So do we have 3 groups here? Okay, chat box is on. Yeah, how many groups are there here? There are 3 groups, right? Sorry, I'm so sorry. 3 groups, right? 3 groups. Are they independent of each other? Can a person have normal, mild, moderate at the same time? Normal, mild, severe at the same time? No, right? They're exclusive of each other, and there are more than 2 groups. What is our data? Is it quantitative or qualitative? Quantitative or qualitative? Quantitative, independent. Is the data measured in terms of mean and standard deviation? Yes, it is measured in terms of mean and standard deviation. Is the data normally distributed? Look at the mean and standard deviation. Yes. At this point in time, when you have more than 2 groups, when your data is normally distributed, at that point, the groups are independent of each other. At that point in time, we use something called as ANOVA, analysis of variance. Okay. Look at this group. What is the type of data? Quantitative or qualitative? Here we try to find out whether there is any difference in the anthropometric parameters between individuals having mild, moderate, normal, pre-hypertensives or hypertensives. The data is quantitative, right? Height, weight, BMI. Is the data measured in terms of mean and standard deviation? Yes. Is the data normally distributed? Standard deviation is less than half of mean. There are more than 2 groups, right? At this point in time, we use what is called as ANOVA. Don't bother about what is this F value. F value is also called as Fisher's value. This comes as a part of our statistical analysis for our ANOVA, like T value in case of t-test or chi-square value in case of chi-square test. F value is a value for the ANOVA. Okay, don't worry much about how to calculate p values. It is all software's business. Okay, software will give you the information. P value is ready-made given by the software. Okay, so this is what we call as, in this condition, we use what is called as ANOVA. ANOVA is going to tell us. Okay, someone is asking where is mean given here. This is mean. 156.1 is mean. 158.5 is mean, and one which is on the right side is called as right to the mean is standard deviation. Okay? So remember these things. Okay, so what is going to tell this table is going to tell us mean height. So let's take weight. Mean weight among normal individuals was 44.5. Among pre-hypertensives, it was 47, and hypertensives, it was 47.1. And it tells us that there is a statistically significant difference in weight between normal pre-hypertensives and hypertensives. Okay, so the ANOVA is going to tell us the difference in mean height between normal pre-hypertensives and hypertensives is statistically significant. But it is not going to tell us which group is significantly different from rest of the group. And for that, we use a set of tests called as post hoc tests. So post hoc tests are the one which are used after you do this is what is the description about it. Post hoc tests are used when the ANOVA is going to tell whether there is a difference and which group is contributing more towards the statistical significance is given by the post hoc test. Let us take this example. The HbA1c values among normal type 1, elastase activity among, let us take this example. Okay, so the hip circumference among normal individuals was 76, pre-hypertensive was 77, hypertensive was 78. So just by looking at it, this group is significantly different from rest of the groups. But how to prove it statistically? For that, we go for the post hoc test. Post hoc tests are a set of, there are 20-30 post hoc tests. And among them, we choose one very commonly used, and it is going to tell which group is significantly contributing to the rest of the groups. I cannot explain it more than this over here because, if you start doing analysis using some software, you are going to get more hold of it. But at least remember, there is something called as a post hoc test. Now, when we have more than two independent groups like mild, moderate, severe, or pre-hypertensives, hypertensives, post-hypertensives, hypertensives. At that point in time, if there are three independent groups, we use ANOVA. But when these groups are dependent on each other, let us take this example. If you want to find out whether there is any difference in hemoglobin levels pre-baseline and 4 weeks, you easily apply pair t-test, right? But there is one more over here at 8 weeks. You cannot apply pair t-test once between baseline and 4 weeks, 4 weeks and 8 weeks, 8 weeks and baseline. This becomes a tedious at this point, but we cannot use ANOVA also over here because the groups are dependent on each other. At this point in time, we use a variation in ANOVA. We call it as repeated measures ANOVA. The difference between ANOVA and repeated measures ANOVA is used when the groups are independent of each other. Repeated measures ANOVA is used when the groups are dependent of each other, when the number of groups are more than 2. Okay? So we use what we call as repeated measures ANOVA. Okay. Now let us come to the non-parametric tests of significance. I have hardly 3 more slides present, and then we can keep the session open for the discussion. Look at this data. So is this quantitative data? The chat box is open. Okay, you preserve your certificate and certificate related questions at the end. I'm very sorry for that. So please look at this data. Is this data? We have tried to find out the scores between the medical and students studying in the private medical college and the government medical college. Scores are what type of data it is? Is it measured in terms of mean and standard deviation? Fantastic. Your data is quantitative in nature. How many groups are there? There are 2 groups, right? Are the groups independent of each other? Can a student be there both in government and private medical college at the same time? Yes, groups are independent of each other, right? How is the data measured in terms of mean and standard deviation? Now look at it. If it is this is the data, so which is a test we usually use? Unpaired t-test, right? Independent sample t-test. But the problem here is, look at the standard deviation and mean. Fantastic. Vinitha is answering. Standard deviation is more than half of the mean. So we are not going to use a parametric test of significance. Here we need to use what test of significance? Okay. So I'm not seeing anybody mentioning abnormally distributed data. Okay, very good. So you have all accustomed yourself with the statistical terminologies, right? So the data is non-parametric. So at this point in time, when your data is not normally distributed and you have 2 independent groups, we use something called as non-parametric variant of unpaired t-test, and the name of the test is Mann-Whitney's U-test. Okay, we usually represent this table like So we usually the table like this. I'm sorry, it is not coming in the slideshow mode. Okay, this table looks something like this. You know, when you use Man-Whitney's U-test, there we are not going to put mean there. We are going to put the median, and along with that, we put the interquartile range. Okay, so the one which you are seeing here is interquartile range. What is interquartile range? So interquartile range is something where you have different quartiles. Quartiles is nothing but 25. You divide the you have a scale, you have a line which starts from 0 to 100. You divide it into 4 segments: 25, 50, 75, and 100. Okay, the difference between 25th observation and 75th observation is called as interquartile range. Okay, don't bother much about it. The softwares are going to give you. So at this point in time, use something called Man-Whitney's U-test. Man-Whitney's U-test is a non-parametric variant of unpaired t-test. Okay, now look at this study, where what is the type of data you have here? Scores, quantitative or qualitative? Quantitative, right? So whether the data is dependent on each other, the groups are dependent on each other. Yeah. At this point in time, if your data is normally distributed, what is the test you want to use? If your data is normally distributed, what is the test you use? Paired t-test. Fantastic. Now look at the data. Is it following normal distribution? No, right? Yeah, at this point in time, we use non-parametric variant of paired t-test. So that is called as Wilcoxon signed rank test. Okay, so Wilcoxon signed rank test is a non-parametric variant of paired t-test. Okay, so what we did here, we did some educational intervention on rabies, and we tried to find out whether there is any difference in the pre-test and post-test scores. Unfortunately, the data was not following normal distribution. At that point in time, the test we are going to use is Wilcoxon signed rank test. And when we did it, so we are going to get this kind of a table. I'm sorry, yeah. So this is a table that is going to tell you about non-parametric variant. So at that point in time, we are not going to use mean and put mean and standard deviation in our table because the data is not normally distributed. At that point in time, we use pre and post. We use the median and interquartile range. Now look at this third example. There are more than 2 groups, right? Number of groups here are more than 2. Right? There is one group of subjects who received leaflet information about breastfeeding using the leaflet. One group received information using the lecture, and the third group received information with both lecture and demonstration. We took their knowledge scores regarding breastfeeding practices. At that point in time, if there are only 2 groups, you use paired t-test. And if there are more than 2 groups, you cannot use a paired t-test. You need to use repeated measures ANOVA. At that point in time, we use non-parametric variant. When your data is not normally distributed, we use a non-parametric variant of ANOVA that is called as Kruskal-Wallis test. I will summarize at this point in time. Let us see. No, I think I'm crossing the time, but I just want you to be with me for another, say, maximum 5 minutes. Remember, when your data, what tests we discussed so far? Number 1, when your data is qualitative in nature, which is measured in terms of percentages. When you want to find out whether there is any difference in these percentages between 2 groups, at that point in time, the test you are going to use is Z-test. When your data is someone has already started responding. Very good. I keep asking, you keep responding. Fantastic. So when your data is categorical in nature, when you want to find out whether there is any association between 2 categories, okay, what is the test you are going to use? Chi-square. Okay, very good. Chi-square test, right? Next, when your data is quantitative in nature, which is measured in terms of mean and standard deviation, the data is normally distributed. When you have 2 independent groups, right? When you have 2 independent groups, data is normally distributed, measured in terms of mean and standard deviation, independent sample test. when you have two independent groups, data is measured in terms of mean and standard deviation, but standard deviation is more than half of mean. Your data is not normally distributed. What is a test? Someone has started putting paired t-test. No. I'll repeat. You have two independent groups. The data is quantitative in nature. Data is measured in terms of mean and standard deviation. But the problem is the standard deviation is more than half of mean. At that point in time, you are going to use man-witness U-test. Okay. Next, here you have two sets of data which are dependent on each other. Data is measured in terms of mean and standard deviation. It is in terms of pre-test and post-test. You have two dependent groups. Data is measured in terms of mean and standard deviation. Data is normally distributed. What is the test you are going to use? T-test. Fantastic. When it is not normally distributed? When it is not normally distributed? Wilcoxon-Saint rank test. Fantastic. When you have more than two groups which are independent of each other, and when you have quantitative data which is measured in terms of mean and standard deviation, and it is normally distributed. ANOVA. Fantastic. When it is not normally distributed? Kruskal values, that is there on the slide now, right? Fantastic. Next, when you are, I think I finished all, right? So this is all about when your data is dependent on each other. There are more than two observations. At that point in time, you are going to when the data is normally distributed, you are going to use a variant of ANOVA that is called as repeated measures ANOVA. Fantastic. I think I'm done with my job. Okay, next two slides on correlation. Please remember, the correlation is used when your dependent and independent variables are continuous in nature. Never ever use the correlation very loosely. When you want to measure your both dependent and independent variables, BMI and weight, they are dependent and independent variables. When both of them are continuous in nature, right? Continuous in nature means there are decimals in between. Only at that data is quantitative. Only at that point in time, you use the term correlation. Sometimes people say, sir, I want to find out whether there is any correlation between depression and gender. Depression is also qualitative data. Gender is also qualitative data. How can I do the correlation there? At that point in time, you are not going to use correlation. You are going to use association, right? So when you have quantitative data, which is continuous in nature, when you want to find out relationship between two quantitative data, there you are going to use what is called as correlation. Look at this example. Here we try to find out whether there is any relationship between weight and height. Height is a quantitative data. Weight is also quantitative data. It is seen from the graph that as the height increases, weight also increases. So this is called as correlation. There can be something called as a positive correlation. As one parameter increases, other parameter also increases. It is called as positive correlation. And sometimes it could be negative correlation. As the age is increasing, the glomerular filtration rate is decreasing. Right? So this is called as negative correlation. And next is there can be no correlation. Okay, there is no relationship between age and total cholesterol. In one particular study, you may debate on it. I'm not talking about the subject. I'm just talking about the statistics, right? So when there can be no relation, if you look at this graph, it is almost flat. Okay. There could be positive correlation. As one parameter increases, the other parameter also increases. Negative correlation, when one parameter increases, the other parameter decreases. And the third one is something called as no correlation. There is no relationship between two particular parameters. So this is something called as R, which I want to tell you, something called as correlation coefficient. R is going to tell us what is the magnitude of this correlation. Right? Look at this. This R varies somewhere from -1 to +1 with 0 in between. -1 to 0 is called as negative correlation. 0 to 1 is called as positive correlation. Okay? So +1 means perfect positive correlation, -1 means perfect negative correlation, and 0 means no correlation. If you look at this particular graph, okay, so here you see R as -0.32. It means that there is a negative correlation, and this 0.32 indicates that there is moderate negative correlation. The R value is usually mentioned as a scale. For example, 0 to 0.25 is called as mild correlation. 0 to plus 0.25 is called as mild positive correlation. Okay. From plus 0.25 to 0.5 is called as moderate positive correlation. Okay, 0.5 to 0.75 is called as strong positive correlation. And if coefficient of correlation R is more than 0.75, it is called as, it is more nearer to +1, right? So you call it as a strong positive correlation. And negative is also interpreted in a similar fashion. Next is a last slide on something called as regression. Covering the whole regression is beyond the scope of my session today because it is a different workshop in itself. Where do we use the regression? Regression is used when you are predicting an outcome. A simple example for regression is, we are predicting the number of COVID cases that are going to occur in month of June. You want to predict what is going to be the temperature tomorrow. You are going to use some variables, and based on that, you are going to come to an interpretation that this is going to be the outcome. Based on the age of mother, based on her parity, based on her hemoglobin level, based on her weight, based on the income of the family, you predict the weight of the baby. So prediction, for doing any kind of predictions, we use what is called as regression. There are different type of regressions. There's something called as linear regression, logistic regression, multinomial regression, polynomial regression, ordinal regression. There are many type of regressions. Keeping the scope of this workshop, unless you do them, it is difficult to understand. So what at least if somebody asks you, whether the regression can be done in this study, if you want to predict the outcome based on your variables, you are going to use what is called as regression. Okay? So to summarize, these are the tests which we discussed so far. So parametric and non-parametric test. In parametric, we discussed student t-test called paired unpaired t-test, Pearson's correlation, and we discussed ANOVA, we discussed chi-square test, we discussed Wilcoxon sign rank test, Mann-Whitney's, Bruscal-Wallis, and Fried. So these are all the things which were there in the store. I just want to keep the option open for the presentation questions.
Praveen?
Yes. Yes, sir.
Praveen, just take a 3-4 questions. I just took it from the chat. So somebody has asked, sometimes when we go for this softwares, that itself suggests the test to be used.
Yes.
Is it reliable?
No. I feel any softwares will give multiple options for the test. So it's something called garbage in and garbage out. You give a test, you select an option, the software is going to give you the result of it. And some students come to us with a big set of analysis, right? So they don't know what to interpret and what not. So at that point in time, what I suggest is you understand what is a test I want to use. Okay, and based on that, you feed the software. This is a test I want. Based on that, the test is going. Software is going to tell you which the software is going to give you the data. And never rely on any software for giving you the results. You need to tell the software, this is a test I want. Based
Somebody has asked that, see, usually in the protocols itself, we are supposed to mention what test we will be using for the planned study. Now, we decided based on what our data is, normal or non-normal. So basically, I think the question is, how do we mention it beforehand?
Yeah. So usually there is by and large, we consider all the data we obtain in our study to be a normally distributed data. This is a normal phenomena in the universe. For God, by God's grace, whatever data we get from the studies, unless proved otherwise, it is normally distributed. Sometime in variety of situations, there can be non-normal distribution of data. Okay. Most important thing I suggest is better always in the protocol mention the parametric test of significance. And when you always have a scope at the end of your study that the data is not normally distributed. At that point in time, you can always go for non-parametric test of significance. But by and large, unless proved otherwise, it is a parameter. You need to mention parametric test of significance. Someone is asking about the Friedman test. I just want to touch on it.
Okay.
Friedman test is nothing but non-parametric variant of two-way ANOVA. ANOVA can be of two types. One is something called one-way ANOVA and the other is called as two-way ANOVA. One-way ANOVA is very simple. You have three different groups and you want to find out whether there is any statistical significance across these three groups. It is called as one-way ANOVA. In two-way ANOVA, you are going to divide these dependent variables into subsections. Mild hypertensive, moderate hypertensive, severe hypertensive against gender. It is one-way ANOVA. In two-way ANOVA, so you divide this mild, moderate, severe into further sections. Like mild, rural, urban, moderate, rural, urban, severe, rural, urban. So what happened here? Out of only 3 groups, you made 6 groups now. At this point in time, you cannot go for regular ANOVA. You have 2 steps to go for ANOVA. You call it as a two-way ANOVA. And if your data is following normal distribution here, you use a ANOVA, two-way ANOVA. If it is not following normal distribution, you are going to use non-parametric variant of this that is called as a Friedman test.
Praveen, there is one more question. Somebody is asking, do we need to write the p-value when we have the r value with classification?
Yeah, with R value also you need to calculate the p-value because R value is going to tell you the correlation. What is the R value is nothing but the correlation coefficient. It says that my correlation is a strong positive correlation. At that point in time, your strong positive correlation could be a real correlation or it could be because of chance. Okay.
Right.
This point in time, you need to test your correlation coefficient to the statistical significance. Okay, so at in that point in time, you have to interpret p-value. One question Anvit is repeatedly asking. If I remember, Anvit
Z and chi-square, right?
Yeah, Anvit is my junior from KIMS. More love and affection. Yeah, Anvit, the difference between chi-square and Z-test is chi-square is going to tell us whether there is any association. If you remember my previous slide, chi-square is going to tell you whether there is association between gender and BMI classification. But Z-test is going to go one in advance. The chi-square says there is an association that ends the story. But the Z-test is going to tell you what is the direction of this difference. Which group is different from the other group. For that purpose, we use a Z-test. Z-test is going to tell you the direction of difference. But the chi-square test is going to tell you overall association. This is a relationship present. And if you want to test the relationship, which direction the relationship is there, you need to go for further test. Z-test is going to tell you which group is different from the other group. So it is going to tell you the difference. And someone was asking about MANOVA. MANOVA is something multiple analysis of variance. When you have multiple type of groups, at that point in time, you use MANOVA. Okay, these are all something called ANCOVA. There are many things which is difficult to explain at this point in time. I think I answered Anvit's question. Chi-square test is for association and Z-test is to look for what is the direction of that association or the difference.
Praveen, one last thing I'll take up. That's on p-value. 2 things I'm combining. One is how do we decide how to set up the p-value for our study? And the other one is it the interpretation of p-value depends on the hypothesis that you take? So these 2 things I've combined. Can you please answer that?
Yeah. P-value, we usually fix p-value. If someone has attended the previous session, I was telling you about the confidence level, right? The confidence level itself is going to give you a hint about p-value. P-value we usually fix before the study. The hypothesis, as someone has mentioned, the hypothesis is going to tell how much p-value we need to fix. What is a p-value we need to fix? Better not to jumble with it. Fix p-value of 0.05. But if there you are allowing 5% chance. As I explained somewhere in my presentation, if your intervention is having more side effects, if your intervention is a bit dangerous, at that point in time you cannot take more chance. At that point in time, you fix your p-value as less as possible, less than 0.05, 0.001. Okay, so you don't allow much chance to occur there. Okay, so it all depends on how much risk you want to take in your study. You allow more chance, you take more higher p-value. You allow less chance, you take lesser p-value. So it all depends, but minimum set of cutoff for the p-value is less than 0.05.
So I think I have completed. One more repeated question from one Dr. Shalini is, please tell McNemar test applicability if you would like to. Otherwise, I think I have taken up almost everything.
Yeah, McNemar test is usually used when your data is matched. For example, we have something called as a matched case control study, where you match each case with each control. Okay, at that point in time, we use McNemar test. And sometimes McNemar test is used when you have the categorical variables, and you have repeated measurement of those categorical variables. Mild, moderate, severe depression before treatment, mild, moderate, severe depression after treatment. Okay, at this point in time, you use what is called as McNemar test. I did not touch much on McNemar test for the reason that we don't use very.
No, I do understand. I do understand. And then I think we have taken up all the questions, and we are already, it's 9:40 almost. So I think, Dr. Sriharsha, any announcements regarding, anything in particular or anything about the feedback and things like that?
Nothing much from my side, sir. I think we can end the webinar today and meet again.
All right. So on Thursday.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much, Praveen, for simplifying the concepts as expected. You've done a wonderful job. I can say that, because this is such a difficult topic, but you've simplified it. Thank you so much. I'm sure that, it would have been very beneficial.
Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for patient listening. And it was, I think I wanted to, whole thing was, I thought I was not very monotonous. So thank you very much for your active participation.